This is the big story of the day. We're talking about the Israeli pager attacks in Lebanon. So, obviously, on Tuesday, a series of pagers were detonated in Lebanon, which Israel calls an attack on Hezbollah. Of course, there was just an obscene amount of collateral damage, many civilians harmed, killed, and injured. And they stepped up those attacks yesterday. So Lebanon reels as more devices explode and casualties rise. New explosions linked to electronic devices killed at least 20 people and injured more than 450 across Lebanon on Wednesday, a day after 12 people were killed and thousands wounded by exploding pagers used by members of the militant group Hezbollah in a suspected Israeli attack. The source of Wednesday's explosions was not immediately clear. The state news agency said some of the explosions occurred in a brand of two-way radio. At least one of the explosions occurred at a funeral in Beirut's southern suburbs held by Hezbollah for people who were killed in Tuesday's blast. So they killed people at the funeral for the first group of people who were killed. Crowds had begun gathering for the funerals when a blast sent people running. Anyone who has a device, take out the battery now, security members yelled to mourners. Turn off your phone, switch it to airplane mode, young men in black t-shirts and khakis shouted. Really a dystopian story. Bystanders at the funeral said a handheld radio exploded in someone's hand at the edge of the crowd. Ambulances pushed through streets filled with men and women in black who were waving flags. The explosions on consecutive days and across the country were the latest cruel trial for Lebanon, reeling from years of economic collapse, political malaise, and 11 months of conflict between Hezbollah and Israel. The first wave on Tuesday overwhelmed hospitals with a flood of maimed patients in what was seen as a broad and terrifying assault on the country and not just a narrow attack on Hezbollah's cadres. The group, which also is a political party, runs social and charitable institutions, hospitals, museums, and construction companies, forming one of Lebanon's many vast patronage networks. Those carrying the pagers that exploded included fighters, but also doctors and other civilian workers, the blasts harming some of the people, such as family members or bystanders in shops they interacted with. The shock of Tuesday's detonations in the middle of the afternoon, shortly after schools had been let out, recalled for many the aftermath of a deadly port explosion in 2020 that killed more than 200 people and injured thousands. Rescue workers who toiled all day Tuesday ferrying the injured were forced back to work Wednesday after the new explosions. We're focused on the injured and putting out fires. Walid Hashash, a paramedic, with Lebanon's civil defense, said Wednesday evening. He was thrown into service a day earlier when a pager injured someone outside a hospital where he was visiting a colleague. As they tended to the injured person, someone on a moped arrived with another wounded person. Then more people started to show up. We didn't know what was happening, he said. The civil defense released a dizzying tally of incidents it had responded to Wednesday, saying they stemmed from explosions in wireless devices and fingerprint analysis devices. 60 homes and shops were affected in the southern Nabatea province, I hope I said that right, and houses, homes, shops, and vehicles were damaged or set on fire by explosions in northern Lebanon, the eastern Bekaa province, and Beirut's southern suburbs. At least 12 people were killed, and as many as 2,800 were injured Tuesday when the pager simultaneously detonated around 3:30 p.m., Lebanese Health Minister Firas Abiad said in a news conference on Wednesday. Israel's military, which often does not announce its operations abroad, declined to comment on whether it was responsible. Experts said the attack appeared to be a sophisticated and pre-planned operation relying on the placement of explosives in the devices sometime before Hezbollah distributed them. The attack came as Israel signaled increased attention to its border with Lebanon. Officials said this week that military action against Hezbollah was needed to allow thousands of northern residents to return home, in a sign that Israel was shifting its focus from the war against Hamas in Gaza. So this looks like another bait for World War III, which is nothing new. Yeah. The deluge of patients at medical centers after Tuesday's explosions was a chilling preview of what Lebanon could face during a war. Medical personnel performed 460 surgeries, including on people with injuries to their faces, eyes, and fingers, and 300 people remained in critical condition, Abiad said Wednesday. Those killed Tuesday included an 8-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy. Iran's ambassador to Lebanon was among those injured, the state-run news agency said. Foreign governments warned that the attack could be a prelude to an escalation in Israel's hair-trigger confrontation with Hezbollah. The British government's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office said in a statement that the deaths of civilians in the explosions were deeply distressing and urged calm heads and de-escalation. Okay, so here is a reporter asking a Pentagon official, hey, is this a war crime? Because it kind of seems like just detonating devices, in civilian areas with no regard whatsoever for civilian casualties. That seems like a war crime. And I would add, this seems like terrorism. I mean, if this happened in America, we would call this a terrorist attack.
Of course it would.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's this.
There's no way to target people that way. You don't know who's holding the pager, who's going to be near it. By definition, that's a terrorist attack.
Absolutely. 100%.
Ethically speaking, as a military officer, is this a capability that falls within the ethical conduct of a war?
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, again, going to do a spot analysis on something that we've seen in press reports. I just don't have any information to provide on that. Sorry.
I'm not a lawyer. Hey, neither am I. It's pretty cut and dry, I would say. But here's the New York Post. Beep, beep, boom. Today cover thousands of Hezbollah fighters injured in Lebanon when their new pagers all simultaneously explode, causing horrifying wounds to their groins and hands. Now, that is essentially a lie. You have no idea how many of these were fighters, how many of these were militants, and how many of these were civilians. No idea whatsoever. That's just an outright lie that this was targeted specifically to combatants and that was all the damage. I mean, that's just absolute nonsense. But here is a semi-literate pizza boy who, for some reason, we are supposed to take an interest in what he has to say. Dave Portnoy, the Barstool Sports guy. I can't wait to watch when this becomes a spy movie. This is the craziest counterterrorism plot I've ever heard of. So just an absolute utter moron, but a moron with a big following. So big a following that he actually caught the eye of the CEO of Twitter, Linda Yaccarino, who comments, blast. So she endorses this violence here. Linda Yaccarino, who I tweeted, was like, if Hal from 2001 were an AI Yenta from Bethpage, Long Island, it would be Linda Yaccarino. So another absolute idiot with apparently a certain taste for terrorism, because that's what this is. And that this is so just haphazardly and cavalierly celebrated in this country is just absolutely despicable. So this is a screenshot. We're obviously not going to show the video of the attack, but this is a screenshot of a clip that went viral right before the attack in a food market. Again, are these combatants shopping for vegetables in the store? You have no way of saying that. That's just an obscene thing to say. But Sebastian Gorka says, mess with the bull, you're going to get the horns. And Representative Brian Mast, this is a member of Congress here, says that's what I call sending a message in response to this. Just utterly despicable. Here's Eli Lake. Can't talk right now. My pager's blowing up. They think it's very, very funny. Really, really funny that this happened. Really funny.
Well, his code name on this show is the Penguin.
Yeah, exactly. But here's what they're laughing it up about. Here's what Dave Portnoy, the pizza boy,
recently
was very impressed by.
Maybe we'll get a chance. He wrote an op-ed claiming, well, the activists in the 60s were terrorists too. And he's talking about the Weather Underground by comparison to today's pro-Palestine activists.
Right. Yeah. No, just a real piece of garbage there. So you have the pizza boy very impressed with this operation. You have the CEO of Twitter very impressed with this operation. You have Eli Lake, among others, laughing it up, yucking it up, gloating at this. This is what they are gloating about. Funeral held for 9-year-old girl killed in Lebanon pager explosions. I use this headline from the Huffington Post because it has her photo there. But the New York Times did a more detailed write-up on the funeral, so I want you to just pay this some mind here. Fatima, the girl's name was Fatima Abdullah, was in the kitchen on Tuesday when a pager on the table began to beep, her aunt said. She picked up the device to bring it to her father and was holding it when it exploded, mangling her face and leaving the room covered in blood, she said. Fatima was trying to take courses in English, Miss Musawi said. She loved English. Her funeral was held in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, a rural area on the border with Syria that is known as a deep well of support for Hezbollah. Many of the injuries on Tuesday occurred in the Bekaa Valley, in southern Lebanon, and in the southern suburbs of Beirut, the capital, all known as Hezbollah stronghold. So, once again, as Russell said, you have no idea who's going to receive this beep here. This was a young girl who picks up the pager, goes to hand it to her dad, and boom, blows her face off. Very funny. Very, very funny stuff,
hilarious.
according to Eli Lake, according to Michael Rappaport, which we're going to see in a minute. David Frum calls this the most precisely targeted anti-terrorist operation in the history of the world. Really? 2,800 injured? On what basis do you say that? Do you have any evidence whatsoever to support that? Here's Michael Rappaport. Thinks this is really, really funny. Here he is.
Beep, beep. Beep, beep. Beep, beep.
This
guy is anti-Semitism Omicron.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, just what absolute sickos. How absolutely vile and psychotic to be out here just celebrating, laughing it up at what is terrorism. That is terrorism. There is no other word for that.
Well, remember, Jews like Rappaport, like Frum, are brainwashed from birth, really, to see the Muslim world as the successors to the Nazis. So, yeah, I mean, to them, this is all. What was the Tarantino movie?
Inglourious Bastards.
Yeah, it's all Inglourious Bastards, right? It's the Jews fighting back against these anti-Semites. They have absolutely no knowledge of history at all of that region at all. They have a completely distorted understanding. A lot of them think the land was empty before they came and the Arabs moved people in there to make the Jews look bad. Like, they have no fucking idea what the actual history is. Honestly, I'm not sure they would care if they did, but most of them don't. For most of them, these are videos of Nazis having their beepers blown up in the middle of the day. That is what they see when they see this. In all wars, there's a necessity of dehumanizing the enemy in order to get people to do these things to other people. What you see with Zionists is that on steroids. Their enemies are the greatest evil the world has ever known. They are a continuation of this great evil. And we'll talk about this a little more with the Richie Torres thing. But this is a great example of how Israel is not protecting Jews from anti-Semitism. It is the greatest purveyor of anti-Semitism in the world, because most people are not Zionists, in spite of the tremendous control Zionists have over media narratives. Most people can see through this. Most people, and they think, if you think Jews are all Zionists and you see this sick piece of garbage laughing about this, well, what are you going to think about Jews if you think Jews are Zionists by definition?
Yeah, no, I mean, yes, I mean, if you insist that to be a Zionist, that to be Jewish is to be a Zionist, is to support this kind of violence, then yes, of course, that's going to stoke anti-Semitism. Absolutely. And then when that happens, you see certain measures taken to squash anti-Semitism, which I would reject. And this gets a little bit into the next segment. I would reject that there is a significant strain of anti-Semitism amongst the actual like Free Palestine movement. You have certain characters who latch on to that as a means to validate their anti-Semitism. But we've run into those types on Twitter and, in our comment section. I haven't seen any of those types at the Free Palestine rallies, at the protests
That
in
has
Chicago.
not been my
Did you see any of those
experience
characters
at all.
there?
Not at
were
all.
around thousands of them.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Well, because these people don't leave their mom's basements.
Right. Exactly.
They're
Right.
terminally online freaks.
Please clap.